Fala galera, eu sou o Tom e vejo muita gente falando besteira na internet, então resolvi fazer o mesmo. Já que você clicou nesse vídeo, se puder, curte, comenta, compartilha, para poder me ajudar ao meu início do meu canal. Então, hoje eu vou reagir a um vídeo da Compulsion Game, que é da Microsoft Studio, e parece estar muito interessante, então eu já estou um tempo querendo fazer, né, desde quando saiu esse vídeo. Estou tentando pensar em fazer mais vídeos assim, tem alguns jogos que vão sair aí no decorrer desse ano e do ano que vem, que eu acho muito interessante a galera ficar de olho. Então, vou começar com esse vídeo agora, com esse react. Aproveitando, se inscreva para ajudar o canal a chegar aos 100 mil inscritos, falta pouco, se inscreva.
In many ways, Midnight is about bringing people together, and magic is all around you. It's about learning empathy for people who aren't like you. It's finding hidden strengths.
It's so beautifully powerful, and I think that it just sort of leaps off the screen.
There's so much atmospheric potential. The landscapes, they're almost like a character in and of itself.
We made these concept songs for all of the creatures. It's not often you get that creative license.
Her journey paralleled with my
Dando
journey
mole
and
como
many
sempre,
of
né?
our
Eu esqueci de
journeys.
mexer na resolução.
She discovers the world is more than what she has known it to be.
Coming up against all of these monsters and
Maneiro,
large
maneiro.
creatures where she can communicate.
Fala que a galera gosta de ver jogo com um personagem gigante assim, lutando, enfrentando, cara. Acho que esse jogo vai fazer sucesso. Espero que esteja bem, né? Vamos ver, se eles não errarem na parte técnica, né? Mas a parte visual tá maneiro, parece a história ser legal. Vai ser bem interessante. Espero que tenha bastante combate e o que eu mais gosto nos jogos, dificuldade. Às vezes eu fico mais feliz com um jogo que eu não zero por causa da dificuldade do que um jogo que eu zerei e achei fácil demais. Geralmente zero todos os jogos, né? Mas se eu travar num jogo com dificuldade, eu fico feliz.
When you walk through a forest in the South, you never know what you're going to find. Now, as a kid, I would already be
largados e pelado aí, ó. Botar o pessoal aí, ó.
Finding plants like great wild grapevines that were so thick and so gigantic, you didn't have to climb them. Mysterious buildings, and they seem to have never served any purpose at all. So you wonder, what was this for? Why is this here? Where did these people who built it go? What happened? It doesn't take too long before the accumulation of mysteries demand an answer, and my imagination provided the answers. So I started inventing adventure stories as I was tramping around and exploring these places that usually featured monsters, and monsters became my best friends. That exhilarating sense of discovery, never knowing what you'll find, this sort of thing is what I wanted to create in a game. The genesis of Midnight was my desire to create a love letter to the South.
Olha, tá parecendo real aí. Que isso? Ó, bonitão. Olha a cidade. Que isso?
Montreal, which is in Quebec in Canada, and
Compulsion Game.
far from the South. We were lucky to have some team members who grew up in the South. None of us were experts in Southern folklore, but we had this monumental task of building a world that was iconic,
Bastante pesquisa.
did feel authentically Southern, and it was with a bunch of creatures that no one in Montreal had ever heard of. I mean, there are lots of people in the South who haven't heard of some of these cryptids. We reached out to Donna Washington, who is a world-renowned storyteller, and she came to our offices and she told a story to the entire company at the time, and it was captivating. It was mesmerizing.
So I spent
I don't even remember what it was, 2 or 3 days, telling stories and taking questions and just sort of immersing the team in folklore. The stories that come out of the southern, well, Gothic stories is kind of what you're dealing with in South of Midnight, are all stories about surviving in difficult times. They're about facing the things that scare you. They're about tricking the things that scare you. They're about laughing at the things that scare you. But what was interesting with our
Interessante ela
team
contando da
was
história.
as they got into the stories and they sort of joined us, it became clear, it became more obvious to them
Isso é maneiro
what the
trabalhando
stories
lá,
were about.
We
fazendo
liked the idea of not just the
jogos,
South, but the
filmes.
Southern Gothic slant towards the Deep South. The stories are usually set in a small town. They usually involve something supernatural, and they're usually soaked in atmosphere.
Adoro coisa
There's
sobrenatural,
a
mas
thing
num
that I
lugar
like
desse
to
assim,
think about called like an
à
imaginary
noite.
nostalgia for a place. So the idea is that, you know, it's okay if players have not experienced like where these genres came from originally, but we're sort of reimagining them and celebrating them again to create like a really
Arte.
cohesive, atmospheric world. And so for us, how I would have translated that to something visual is really leaning on the weight of the past. That's a big thing for Southern Gothic. Old decaying buildings, overgrowth, quiet places, old houses, places that tell a lot of old stories. And then there's the supernatural sort of magic realism element with ghosts and myths and legends.
A lot of
Quero ver
creatures
muitas batalhas
in
dos
this
chefes.
folklore,
Tem bastante monstros
they
gigantes.
sort of balance on the edge between the known and the
Aquele
unknown.
crocodilo tá maneiro.
Almost
Espero que não
all
mostre muito do
the
jogo, né?
creatures within South of Midnight are inspired by folk tales from the various regions of the South. And if not a folk tale, it's taken from an urban legend that's well on its way to becoming a folk tale. Something's out there, clearly, something anomalous. People become obsessed with learning about them. But to date, no one's really gathered any conclusive evidence or proof that they exist, or really identified what they are.
Um aviso, né? O jogo, quando aparece as imagens, você vê meio estranha, mas é da arte do jogo mesmo, entendeu? Eles fizeram uma quantidade de quadros menores, né? E faz parte do jogo. Mas eles já falaram que vai dar para jogar com 60 quadros, entendeu? E só as animações que não vão ser dessa forma. Então isso faz parte da arte do jogo. E espero que isso seja compreendido no futuro, né? Porque às vezes algumas empresas fazem uns jogos assim, nos estúdios, que faz uma arte, coisa, e as pessoas falam, não, mas a arte desse jogo, aí quando um outro estúdio faz uma arte, né, aí não, isso é horroroso, esse tipo de gráfico é horrível, é cartoon, é não sei o que, é jogo inferior, é tudo isso, entendeu? Mas esse jogo vai estar incrível, mesmo ele com essa estética e esse tipo de frames que eles usaram, tá muito interessante a história, vai contando, entendeu? Então só queria botar esse aspasinha aí na gameplay quando for mostrando, entendeu? O tipo de movimentação, que é a ideia do estúdio fazer isso.
The creatures are all inspired by real folk tales. However, there's not a lot of visual information on the exact look of these creatures, which gave us a lot of flexibility to interpret them. For me, getting the tone, mood, and making sure they
Acho maneiro essas
have
artes, cara.
dark elegance to them was really important.
So while you'll see haints everywhere, every region has a distinctive creature, and they rule entirely. So each kingdom is structured so that you understand how did a creature become a monster.
Vê meio que a movimentação como é
The
diferente.
sort of variety of creatures that we have in South of Midnight is really cool. The creatures and just sort of like the wild embodiment of like nature, but also human anxiety is very interesting. But also like human errors and challenges and the ways that we hurt each other sort of manifest as creatures as well. There's some sort of whispered rumors about creatures that you shouldn't cross, that Hazel has to.
Each creature
Tem essa habilidade, LB, RB.
journey. is going to have a specific impact on her. Some will be forcing her to face things that she has run away from. Others will simply create a huge sense of fear in her
Maneiro.
and summon her to dig deeper and to believe in herself.
Now, ultimately, Hazel wants to assist creatures, but there are some that are not really alive. They are from a darker place, driven by trauma. They want to feed on guilt and fear. And these
Se alimentar da
creatures
culpa do
she
medo.
has to destroy. But
Ó,
the creatures
puxa.
with human
Ó, tem as
souls,
habilidades
she
com
wants to help.
RB. Esse é um bonequinho, um RB, uma seta.
Magical realism is part of the vision for South of Midnight. Magic is real,
Maneiro.
monsters
Grelhinho,
are real, the
caraca.
unexpected can happen at any time. But the farther you go from the town center or the urban center, the more magical the world becomes. And it becomes a driving force, because once you start to notice even minor details that are out of place or unusual, you want more. And that's the way we built Midnight.
O gráfico.
For someone who,
Zoeira.
you know, is
O cara parece até real.
fundamental magical form, Hazel, your character, I think she likes it too.
Pulo do. Boa. Plana, né?
I think if you're making a game set in real locations, you have to go to those locations as much as possible.
Ah,
To
legal.
sort of
Ainda viaja ainda para poder fazer um jogo. Eu vi como é que é.
So, in that spirit, I devised 2 week-long excursion/research trips to the South for all of the directors.
Pra todo mundo, ó. Que isso, ó.
Because South of Midnight is set in a sort of twisted alternate version of the Deep South, where we use different landscapes that are iconic to the Deep South. So we went to the Appalachians, we went to the swamps, we went to New Orleans, we went through the Delta, and South of Midnight has a bunch of archetypal locations from the Deep South. Hazel Flood, our main protagonist, she gets projected into this sort of folkloric version of the Deep South. We have the swamps, we have the Delta, we have the Appalachians, and we have an area that's inspired by New Orleans. The landscapes they're almost like a character in and of itself in the game.
Sorts.
A lot of people who
Lusiana, sabia que era Lusiana. Aparece muito largados e pelado lá, o pessoal lá. Dizem que tem lugar lá que é sinistro. Teve um lá que o cara viu até um rosto assim nas árvores. Muito engraçado como a mente da gente faz as coisas.
A lot of people might hear about the Underground Railroad, but you know, a lot of people don't know that the Great Dismal Swamp was like a stop on the way. Imagining people build settlements out here is like really wild, really, really wild. It's very inspirational though.
It is, because this is not a place I feel like you live willingly, like you're doing it out of necessity.
Morar voluntariamente.
Did you get it?
I did.
So it actually is really nice to normalize this setting.
And even as a game setting, this isn't a usual setting.
I mean, it's a little daunting trying to bring that history to the forefront. You feel like a great degree of responsibility.
Yeah.
I like to make worlds that people might be familiar with in some way or another, but they might not realize they
sendo
are.
Um tipo artístico diferente, cara. Mas, cara, olha.
And I feel like we
Isso
don't
é real,
give
cara.
players enough credit for wanting to see new worlds.
Esse detalhezinho, cara.
So as we're going through each of these locations, we're going to be introduced to a new creature, a new person. We get a really interesting look into what's happened to them and what we can do to possibly help them. So that mood is then going to expand out into the environment. So we have a central theme. How can we reflect that in the environment? Is it going to be dark and gloomy? Is it scary? If so, it's going to affect the time of day. If it's something a bit more cheery, you know, we can have that happening in the morning.
Cara, eu não sei, só conheço um jogo desse estúdio, cara. E agora ele está fazendo uma parada assim.
I would encourage people who are playing the game or watching gameplay to just look around and see what type of vegetation is there, what's on the ground.
Fico muito feliz, assim, um estúdio pequeno, foi adquirido pela Microsoft, né? Esse estúdio. E ganhando a oportunidade de fazer uma coisa incrível dessa, cara.
In the Deep South by establishing very authentic soundscapes. And we did that by employing Andy Martin to go actually into the swamps of Louisiana and record over the course of 6 months, I believe.
Gravando o som do ambiente.
To capture the sounds of the South.
Caralho, foda.
And we also worked with Thomas Rex Beverly to get sounds of the Kentucky mountains and Tennessee landscapes and sounds.
Deixa o equipamento lá. Maneiro. Está bem maneiro isso aí.
Look, where'd they go? Here, sheath. Because this game is so very specific, you know, Hazel being from the Southeast, Hazel being an athlete, you know, being a track star. And I wanted the intricacies of those things to really pop out in Hazel. And it's the type of subtlety that really brings a character to life.
Hi, hon.
How are you? I'm ready to go.
Cool, let's rock.
Both Adrian and Nona, who play Hazel, have strong ties to the Southeast.
Cool, so this first line, we're just gonna do 3 in a row, and this is you walking up to Bo's house.
You had to grow up too fast.
Nice.
When I first seen a picture of Hazel, I was like, oh my gosh, that could really be me. Just her facial structure resembled mine. So what I did is I dressed exactly like Hazel in my audition, and I had fun with it.
I'll clean it up. Jeez, your great-grandmother made this. And you never told me that.
And I would say that some of the details that I really hone in on is the accent.
Oh my God. Who would do that to a kid?
My family's from North Carolina, so I had a background of what that accent would sound like, and then I had a little bit of training to help me with just to really precisely place it where it needed to be. And then with her attitude, I just got to make sure I am in a spunky, ready pace. You know, she has sassiness, she has a modernness to her, but she's also respectful of her elders. She's also very empathetic. She's very driven, competitive. And I remember just feeling so connected. Her journey paralleled with my journey and like many of our journeys.
This story centers around a young Black girl, so I couldn't help but be just in love with that idea. And I think Hazel in the writing and the way that she's designed, it's so beautifully
uma faz a voz, a outra faz o
that it just sort of leaps off the screen. And the way that she speaks and carries herself, the way that she allows herself to be vulnerable and scared,
essa mulher não é estranha,
and confused and unprepared, I think is something I'm really excited that we get to follow in this story, in her story.
Shaking bones.
The handcrafted style is applied into everything. There's something soulful about that, and I think it resonates with a lot of people, and it felt really appropriate for this deep South, Southern Gothic dark fantasy to have this sort of organic, natural touch to the style.
Boo, what?
Yeah, I saw you jumping.
We had to figure out a style where things are exaggerated. There's little thumbprints and imperfections, and everything kind of has this sort of twisted feeling to it. So we went and visited this stop-motion studio in Montreal called Clyde Henry, and they have a really special style that has this sort of dark, twisted eeriness that was something we wanted for
miniatura
maneira. And we actually looked at their maquettes and looked at how they were made, and then the artists went back and we had to create techniques to reverse engineer how things are actually made by hand. Everything from the foliage to the props to the buildings to the characters, they all have a handcrafted look to them.
Maybe I could help bottle up the paint.
So I'm the last person left here.
So the animation style is just stop motion. So a lot of the narrative of the game is that you have Hazel, who is, you know, while searching for her mother, coming across a number of people in the world who have gone through things. They have experiences. Everyone's got something that's made them a little rough. And while she has the power to weave and heal these sort of things, there becomes a sort of understanding of people's imperfections, those experiences that they've had, sort of define who they are as a character. It's nighttime, you can leave, but they're starting to go banging on door to door to each house. And so the stop motion treatment gives us the opportunity to bring in those little moments of friction, of imperfection, individuality. You feel it in the animation, you feel it in the motion, you feel it in performances, and that matches what you feel in the narrative and the relationships you have with characters. One take. Yeah.
Hazel is coming into her power.
She's
a young woman who, through this adventure, finds the true nature in herself as a leader. She finds her magical powers.
She's awakening to a world of possibilities she did not know existed. So the main character that you control, Hazel, is a weaver. She's inseparable from her weaver abilities. All of them are calculated to make you more aware or continuously aware of how the weaver sees the world and how she can pull from the world to traverse in extreme ways that normal humans simply can't do. The most important metaphor about your abilities as a player is the perception of trauma in creatures. You can see it. It's like a cancer.
So the ability to weave is you can take these big masses of dark energy and release it from each other, release it so the good can get in, so the good can thrive. And that's what I love about Hazel Flood is the things that she's doing are all a part of healing and helping others.
It's inspired by textiles and crochet and knitting, and we wanted to sort of take back this, which is traditionally considered more of a feminine art, and make it this powerful, beautiful magic. And we wanted it to really feel like this is how she does magic, is by manipulating these tangible strands. And the look of them was very much inspired by lace. Lace is very Southern Gothic. It's this like supernatural, living, sort of sentient material.
Isso aí é da serviço do jogo, ó. Vamos esquivar.
I was looking for a strong blend of diegetic music.
Espero que tenha bastante jazz nessa aí.
Using instruments and musical styles that are common to the various regions of the game that we were inspired by from the real South.
I remember David coming back from a trip to the South, and he had this epiphany. He told me that he wanted the action to equal musicality.
Right.
And I was very intrigued with this creative direction. You know, I was like, okay, how do we do that? After
trilha sonora vai ser foda
we
também, cara.
thought of Olivier de Rivière, because he not only is he a great composer, he's also an amazing interactive music specialist.
We wanted the music to be very much involved into the world in itself and illustrate the world as much as capturing what the player is doing moment to moment. You know, it goes like ba, 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 bang, bang, bang. But the more we're talking, the more I understood why they reached out. They didn't ask me to be like, okay, do a perfect, you know, like bluegrass music, do a perfect country music. It was quite
Workout também é barro.
Take the flavor of this, but make it your own. Take it to another land. There was something from the South, which is songwriting.
Falar, vou gostar muito da trilha sonora desse filme.
Writing team and David supplied those lyrics for these songs.
É, vai me amar.
She'll snatch you up if you go out at night.
When you came here at the studio, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because I would think that somebody with such a backstory in his voice should be older.
It's something that's sort of in your soul, I guess, from the time you're born. I always said I'm kind of a
25-year-old man in a 60-year-old body, you know.
Ó, maluco, 25 anos, porra. Vai, maluco, uma vozeirão.
It's performed by people from the regions where the music is played or where the music originated.
Tonight.
Yeah, going to Nashville was something. It's alive. It's just music all over the place.
Walking up and down the main stretch, I think it's called Broadway, hearing all the music coming out, like seeing these performers, being able to go to the RCA studio and meet our performers, it's just historic, and I think influences how you make the game. And we wanted to work with these artists from the South, singers from the South, fiddle players, drummers, organ players. David was from a gospel church in Nashville, and the chords and play style is just incredible. Meeting the choir, and everyone's just got music running through their blood. It's amazing to be around, and often left me feeling quite inadequate.
Feel good about this? All right, let's try that.
Last night
You're singing as the character. So you need to wear this sort of, persona that is not you, and you need to perform as this persona. So it's always magical when it happens, because the first takes, it's like a little bit, timid, a little bit like we don't know. And then I start to push and push and push and push.
Mama will be there in the morning.
Já me ganhou essa porra dessa música, cara.
Sort of interactive. The more you embrace being a weaver, the more of the music of the universe you hear during gameplay. And we wanted the universe to literally talk to the player. And we used children's choir voices.
And so the idea was like, as you go through the level, you will
Espero que seja pra evoluir e mudar essas habilidades ali. Tem bastante habilidade.
And as you do this, you will as well unveil the song. Not in a way that is
Desculpa, tá? Pegar.
but rather in an unsettling, sometimes disturbing way. There is this entity that is very evil, and we've said, this is completely out of the scope of, let's say, guitars, banjo, all of this. This is like massive, and it can take over, yourself. So we were like, we need something that is completely different and something that is impressive. And that's why we picked up an orchestra for those moments.
The process of us recording with everyone together is fairly rare, in fact very rare. It puts a little bit more onus on the performance and making sure that the balance, the blend, all those musical details are really finessed.
That was why we thought that was so interesting. Like the orchestral textures which were felt out of place in the Deep South. By cleaning those zones of those entities, you removed the out of place, the orchestral textures, and replaced those with voices and with grounded instrumentation and the ambience that returned.
Outra palavra.
Because it's more like he's putting me down. I guess he has me at the waist.
She's like, she's like this, so she just exaggerated more.
Let's do one more.
Yes. Good look. Knees up. Collapse. Struggle, struggle.
The challenge is really the fact that a character like Hazel in a game like this hasn't really been done before, you know, and it hasn't been done in a way that really brings to light what it is like to be a young Black woman in this time period with these challenges and the complexities that come with that.
I mean, when I think about how many games are set in the South with a strong Black female lead, I don't recall that many. That in itself shows how important this is.
I think it's really cool that a little Black girl could cosplay Hazel with the hair that's growing out of her head. It's nice to see yourself reflected in a piece of media and not in a way that feels stereotypical or inauthentic.
Like Hazel, we can be weavers, we can be fairies, we can be magic users. We can do a lot more than just, I think, what people assign to the South.
We hope that one day you'll be able to play a character like that, but it's really important that Hazel's story is relatable to a lot of different people. Like, I think you don't have to also be like a Black woman to understand and relate to Hazel.
You know, she's battle ready, but then she's also, you know, opening up to her inner child, and then it gets really dangerous at other times. She's kind of doing a little bit of it all. I think it shows how expansive this world is.
Whether these people are humans or they're a giant necrotic alligator, all of these creatures are worth helping, and helping in the way they want.
Beautiful. Well done. I think that's just a really strong message that there is a power in healing. You know, we can actually heal through our pain.
And it's a journey of finding empathy for those who seem like they shouldn't receive any at all. I think that's really important. I think that's something that makes this game so important and so unique.
I'm going to be sad to leave the world of Midnight. Having family that lives in the Deep South, there's just so much there from a cultural standpoint that just has endless depth and interest. This game has allowed us to really dive into that.
I just want it to be something different. I want people to dive in and be like, I had never played anything like that before, or this was a totally new environment or very weird setting. I think people are going to go into this and walk away seeing a lot of characters and locations they're not familiar with. I think it is unique and different.
In the end, I'm even surprised by the final music. I think everybody will be surprised. That's why it's a very big pleasure and a privilege to work on a production like this, because art prevails.
I think that it's important to show the folklore, the magic, and the creatures in the South and share them with the whole world.
Você tá roupa. Cinco, caraca, vou ter que esperar esse jogo. Pensei que esse jogo ia ser pra esse ano. Já tá finalizando o ano já. Cara.
CNBC's Jane Wells live in Los Angeles with how the 360s problem.
Old decaying building.
Cara, vou te falar, esse jogo vai estar incrível. E vou dizer, não sou de ficar hypado com o jogo não, porque eu gosto de jogar tudo, entendeu? Mas esse aí, principalmente pela trilha sonora, já me ligou bastante, entendeu? O gameplay parece estar legal, a arte tá excelente. Tá tudo, porra, parece perfeito. Vamos ver na hora de jogar, né? Assim, cara, fiquei até gostei pra caramba de fazer esse react aqui, cara, que eu não pensava nem assistir. Se eu não fosse fazer o vídeo, eu acho que não teria deixado passar batido o vídeo, entendeu? Dessa vez eu assisti, prestei atenção de... Pô, cara, tá incrível, tá incrível. Esse vídeo me empolgou pra jogar esse jogo. Não sei, não tem muita coisa pra falar, cara. Tá incrível, achei incrível, entendeu? E como eu falei, a trilha sonora, o jogo vai... Se o jogo tiver ruim, eu vou jogar ainda muito mais pela trilha sonora, nem que fique parado lá com a personagem escutando a música. Cara, acho incrível. Um blues, um jazz, um country, porra, ainda essas paradas tudo misturado ainda no jogo, cara, na ambientação. Esse jogo vai tá incrível, entendeu? Vai tá incrível. Gostei muito, tá de parabéns. Cara, fico muito feliz pela Compulsion, que era um estúdio pequeno, né? Foi adquirida pela Microsoft. E aí, boa escolha da Compulsion pela Microsoft, cara. Acho muito legal o que a Microsoft fez de adquirir um estúdio pequeno, um potencial. E até então só conheço o Happy Few deles, se eu não me engano é isso. O Happy Few, uma coisa assim. Eu não sei se é o único jogo deles. E, cara, que evolução incrível. É, dinheiro, né? Ajuda muito, né? Mas mesmo assim, pô, o que eles fizeram, cara, a evolução, é muita dedicação, entendeu? Pegaram uma história fantástica, entendeu? E, cara, não tenho mais o que dizer. Foda, tá foda. Não tem nem o que zoar, entendeu? Queria fazer alguma zoeira, não posso usar nada, cara. Não tem como. Foi incrível ter assistido esse. Vou te falar, gostei bem mais do que Indiana Jones, entendeu? E olha que eu gosto de Indiana Jones. Então, galera, quem me assistiu até o final aqui, porra, deixa uma curtida aí, deixa um comentário, bota um número, bota qualquer coisa, bota uma carinha feliz, bota um carinha, ou bota um dedinho me enviando pra mim, entendeu? O dedinho no meio, tanto faz. Coloca alguma coisa aí nos comentários, fala o que você achou do jogo, e eu vou te falar que me surpreendeu bastante vendo esse trailer documental aí, né? Esse documentário Espero que todo jogo a Microsoft faça isso. Lance um documentário do estúdio fazendo o jogo, mostrar ali a produção, toda a equipe. É bom que dá uma visibilidade para as pessoas também lá, entendeu? Então não vou me estender mais. Espero que tenham curtido. Curte, comenta e compartilha. Valeu, está me ajudando muito. Beijo, fui.